Hello and welcome to Anaesthesiologist listeners. I'm your host Adhivir Kapuria, a young teen now entering my senior year of high school. If you, like me, are standing on the cusp of change and feel like you're running out of steam just when it matters most, then you, my friend, are in the right place. Having borne the brunt of an education system that is intensely competitive and stressful, I see many others trapped in the endless and laborious maze of exams with anxiety as their constant and unwelcome shadow. Packed schedules, cutthroat competition, and constant pressure to do better has made anxiety feel like that pesky monkey on the back that constantly weighs you down. News of rapidly climbing student suicide rates in a country with the largest ever youth population is extremely disconcerting and is screaming for attention. There's an urgent need to focus on how we can ease stress on students rather than coming up with desperate preventive measures like installing anti-hanging devices in hostel rooms. And so joining me today is someone who has explored a very interesting way to help students manage their stress: music therapy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Farah Husain. Dr. Husain is an anesthesia specialist with over 15 years of experience in both corporate and government sectors, having the unique distinction of being a certified music therapist. Dr. Husain has authored over 22 national and international publications, contributed to key textbooks, and received several awards, including Creative Music Therapist of the Year 2022 by the Indian Music Therapy Association. She has been helping students cope with exam-related anxiety through the transformative power of music. So it gives me great pleasure to discuss how music therapy can be a game changer in dealing with stress and anxiety, and how it can help us find a much-needed sense of calm and focus during these challenging times. Welcome, Dr. Hussain. Pleased to have you with us. Could you please share a little more about your background with our listeners? We'd love to know more about your journey as a doctor and as a music therapist.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much, Adhivir, for having me here. And
The pleasure is mine, ma'am.
So I think if you would want me to start on my journey, let me start from the beginning. When I was 8 years old, I was a storyteller of my class. I was involved with vocals. I used to be the choir member in the assembly and was extremely interested in dramatics. But, there was this thing that my dad had sort of ingrained in me that, you have to grow up to be a doc. So, to pursue my dad's dream, which became my own dream, all these things sort of got shelved. But in 1998, when I cracked my exams and I was able to secure an MBBS seat, I sort of continued my passions in music. And I was a part of my choir in the MBBS medical college as well. And during the course of medical education, I realized that preventive healthcare was significantly lacking in India. So, being an anesthesiologist, I understood that in order to optimize my patients right before surgery, they just needed a little bit of counseling and a little bit of a push in the right direction to get their health in order and in perspective. So I wanted to reach out to the general public, and I understood that music was an extremely engaging way, an entertaining as well as an empowering way. So I went ahead and became a certified music therapist. I started using musical interventions and storytelling abilities, and in fact, wanted to create preventive healthcare and awareness of health risks through the same. UNICEF, in fact, was kind enough to select me as one of their influencers during the COVID crisis, where they wanted to generate awareness about the COVID vaccine.
Oh, wonderful, ma'am. I think it's really great how you've managed to merge your passions and talents and find such an innovative solution, which I have to say is groundbreaking in India, at least. And I'm very happy to be having a conversation on exam-related anxiety among students with you. Because, whenever I have exams, and I'm sure that's the case for many of my peers and people across this age group, they feel really stressed and they worry about underperforming. They worry about not meeting their own expectations of adults around them, expectations that their friends might have set, that their teachers might have set. And that only tends to make their anxiety worse, right?
Yep.
So what was your experience with anxiety and what motivated you to focus on this area?
So as a young medical student, I would say exam anxiety is significantly present in all of us. But I think it's one of the better anxieties to have because it sort of prepares you for the other anxieties that will be facing in the near future. So it actually is how you interpret it. That anxiety is required to improve your performance. It gives you that kick, it gives you that push, it gives you that stress level to boost your performance. We need to understand that anxiety can get translated into other forms of anxiety. But I would like to share with you how a medical student deals with the other anxieties that they face during their educational training period. So as a young 18, 19-year-old person or a young 20-year-old, I had to go out there and break the bad news to another young teenager that, we lost his mother. We had to go and break bad news about someone who just had a kid who had jumped off the building. We knew that, this could be any of us. And that kind of life and death situation gave me a very solid perspective on what anxiety is and how I need to detach myself from emotionally challenging situations, yet retain the empathy that is required to become a good physician. So music helped me a lot during those times, especially during the pandemic. I used to, drive back all the way to my home from the hospital. The roads were completely empty. There was a lot of, disquiet in the silence around us. And somehow I found myself singing all the old choir assembly songs every day that I used to drive back. I wouldn't want to listen to the music. Rather, I wanted to engage myself singing the way that I used to sing. And I used to feel thankful and blessed for the day to have ended on hopefully a positive note for the tomorrow to come. So I decided if this much of music can help me, I might as well use it for the benefit of others. And I decided this musical prayer routine right outside my COVID ICUs, where all of us in our PPE kits, we used to stand together and sing my favorite assembly song, which was We Shall Overcome or Hum Honge Kamyab.
Very, very well put, ma'am. I think music is somewhat of a constant companion for everyone, and music is able to break barriers of age, of gender, of class, even. And I think everyone has those couple of songs, a couple of tunes that they can just hum and automatically feel a bit relaxed and feel a sense of calm and feel a sense of homeliness. And I think, that's the case for myself and a couple of friends of mine as well. I think we tend to associate music to certain feelings as well.
Yeah.
So, for example, during COVID time, during COVID time, my brother had left for college, and that was a pretty big void in my family because I was always used to him as my best friend inside my house. And when he had left, I often listened to songs that he would often play, even if I didn't necessarily like them. He was a huge fan of Punjabi music, and I didn't really understand any of the lyrics, but I still used to play them. And I think gradually I grew a liking towards them just because of these memories that I had shared with him. So I think, it's very well put by you, ma'am. But just to get a more scientific lens, I want to ask you what some effective coping strategies can be for students to manage exam-related anxiety, and how has music therapy been shown to improve academic performance?
Yes. So as students, all of us develop our own coping strategies. I'm sure you did as well. I would probably engage in small group discussions, ensure that I have, talked about all my difficult topics or created solutions to the problems. And I used a lot of maths in reality. So I used to divide the questions that were more difficult amongst my friends. And each of us used to come up with a specific answer. So again, I said the SGD or the small group discussion was very helpful. I turned a lot to prayer, and I turned a lot to understanding that I would have to do my best and God will do the rest. I also turned a lot to understanding that, if there is a challenge that faces me, I need to stand up to the challenge and not buckle down under it. So that's where facing a challenge, changing your perception of stress really helps. So I used to do a lot of mindful exercises. I used to think of being in the moment rather than being in the exam hall when I was studying. I used to focus on my prep rather than my performance. I used to focus on the small little things that would give me, gratification goals. So I would suggest all students to, give yourself simple goals during your preparatory exercises. Don't give yourself far-sighted things which are a little difficult to achieve and obviously bog you down. And hence, while my postgraduates who had just finished the COVID postings, I decided to help them out with a scientific coping strategy, which was music therapy. I decided to give them something called as the Mitra, that is music therapy to relieve anxiety. It's an acronym that I created with the help of some of my colleagues at my medical college, and we started a clinical trial. And during that clinical trial, I voluntarily allowed my postgraduates to participate in it, where I gave them a simple 5-minute mindfulness routine where they had to listen to a particular raga that I had decided for them. It is Raga Hamsadhwani. It's a Carnatic raga with a pentatonic scale. And we'll talk about that raga in just a few minutes. But I gave them a simple routine to adapt in their curriculum, so nothing to change their study routine as such. 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening. And we did a self-reporting of anxiety scores and well-being index. And we were able to generate a significant change overall. And luckily, all the students that took part in the trial passed with flying colors.
Oh, wonderful, ma'am. Glad to hear about the results of the experiment and glad to hear that they actually went to plan. And I think on your prior points, it is very important to break down tasks really into goals that are accomplishable. I think it was a topic called SMART goals, specific, measurable goals.
Yes.
And I think those are very important in every teenager's life because you might face challenges that often seem insurmountable, but at the same time, if you take it one step at a time, if you
Yep.
really break things down and you prioritize the right things, then I think you can gradually map out a road to reach exactly where you intend to. And I think that's very important. But coming back to what you mentioned, Raga Hamsadhwani, I believe you had said,
Yes.
you mentioned it in your research paper and how it is used to relieve exam related anxiety. So, could you just go a bit deeper into how Indian classical ragas can be used therapeutically and what specific benefits do they offer?
So, Adivir, actually, the best part about the Indian raga system is that it is unique. It is extremely different from the Western classical system. And that is because the ragas that were created in Indian classical music were all intended for the purpose of the well being of the listener, be it spiritual well being, be it mental well being, be it physical well being. So we have about 100, 130 Indian classical ragas in two sets of Hindustani as well as the Carnatic forms of music. And each raga is a not just a mere collection of notes, it's like a complex musical framework in which there is a lot of pitch, a lot of melody, a lot of harmony which is embedded together. And it is supposed to create a mood or a rasa that is called in the Indian version a mood in the minds of the listener. So, unfortunately, there have not been many research studies or research papers for this particular set of, Pandora's box that we have in the Indian classical music arena. And I just thought, why not to use something which is unique in its own way and, provides that kind of benefit therapeutically. So I wanted to prove it scientifically, and hence I decided to use Raga Hamsadhwani, which is basically a rag that can be played anytime during the day. It's got a beautiful story attached to it. It's about the muted swan. So basically, swans mate for life, right? They have one partner. So here is a story behind the whole raga: how a swan who was born mute was unable to sing and sort of look out for a partner in his entire duration of his lifetime. But then finally, God gives him that one power right before he goes to meet his maker, and the song that he sings is the Rag Hamsadhwani, and that is the power of this song. The song creates an upliftment of mood, it creates emotional stability, it raises your intellectual powers and improves your memory. So I thought it was the best to be used for students, especially who are facing exam related anxiety, because if you have all these things balanced out with the stress levels of an exam coming up, it would have really worked wonders. And luckily it did. Scientifically it did. So I was able to prove that. So there are a number of other ragas. For me, I just figure out which is the best tune to go with the mood of the day or the part of the day, because ragas are all based on timings of the day as well. The rags that I really like are Rag Bhairavi, I really like Rag Hamsadhwani, and I also love the Rag Tilak Kamod, which has apparently been created by Tansen, and he used to sing it to Emperor Akbar whenever Akbar was very stressed out. So a lot of history there for you.
Yeah, a lot of history. And it's wonderful that for your solution, you dug so deep into things that have been traditionally very rich in India. I think India is a country very rich in culture. And I think rags and India's music culture in general, as you rightly mentioned a bit earlier, it's very different to Western music in the sense that there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of depth. And I think it's wonderful that you've explored this. And it was really, really interesting to me when I was reading about this and when I was reading about its effects, because there definitely is a biological connection between listening to music and human physiology. And music does affect the brain in various ways, whether it be by releasing chemicals like dopamine, which is the feel good hormone, right, or oxytocin, which helps us feel calm and collected.
Yes,
And
absolutely right.
as you rightly said, yes, lowering our stress hormones,
Mhm.
probably reducing our heart rate, lowering blood pressure, and overall helping us relax. I think it's a wonderful exploration, and I'm really glad that I'm getting to hear from you about it. It's very interesting. But if I were just to break the flow of this conversation for a minute and ask you if you have any fun or memorable stories from your music therapy research, any surprising moments, any heartwarming moments that you encountered during this research, I think the listeners would love to know.
Yep. So recently, a friend of mine, again from school, invited me to her office, and there were about 70 hearing impaired employees. Now, people who are hearing impaired, obviously, it's difficult to converse with them because you have to use a sign language instructor, and let alone how would one perform a music therapy session for them or engage with them in a meditation or a mindfulness session. So I was invited to conduct a mindfulness session where I would be de-stressing them and giving them a few tips to take back home and feel well. So that's when again the research came into picture. You've heard about Beethoven, right? One of the greatest musicians of all time. He was deaf and he continued to create symphonies, continued to create classical pieces of music that were extremely loved by the entire generations to come. So when he became hearing impaired, he decided and figured out how he would continue to make the music. And I figured it out by reading and researching on his life post his hearing impairment. So he used something which we actually use for the hearing aid technology, which is what we call as bone conductance. So he would use a small wooden piece of a kind of a wooden pipe, and he would place that in the middle of his teeth, and he used to place the other end at the end of the piano, and he would start playing the piano, and he would feel the vibrations, and he could decipher the vibrations as different pitches and different chords that were going to be placed for different tunes, and generated one of the best pieces of music, which is the Ode of Joy. Ode for Joy, when it was created, it became a masterpiece in itself. And I decided to use the same for the hearing impaired employees. And I took one of my son's drumsticks and I placed it at my throat, and I went ahead and I placed the other end on the palm of the hands of the employees. And the joy that they experienced the moment they felt the music running through the drumsticks up to the palm of their hands, to their arms, right to their heart and soul. It was a joy. It was indeed one of the best moments that I have actually felt in my life, where I could bring about that joy in a person who has deprived of a few very important senses that God has granted us with. So that was one of the most memorable experiences for me as a researcher as well as a music therapist.
That's amazing to hear, ma'am. I think I can only imagine how rewarding it must have felt, actually being able to apply your learnings and knowledge to probably change people's lives. And it's really inspirational. I think kudos to you for all the work you've done, ma'am, all the hard work you've put in.
Thank you.
And it's wonderful to hear about these positive effects and influences you're able to have on other lives through this research. And it's a great story to hear. It's a wonderful story to hear. And yeah. Now coming back to the topic that we were discussing about exam-related anxiety, because I think that's something that the audience will relate to a lot. And I say that because that's something I relate to a lot. And test anxiety, I feel it can heighten a student's focus on their results, but I think it detracts a bit from the genuine engagement you have with the content that you're studying. And I'll tell you why. This is because I've experienced it firsthand, that the pressure to perform well in exams, it overshadows your intrinsic motivation to learn at times, right? And it leads to a sort of cyclic effect where anxiety maybe becomes a barrier to deeper understanding and enjoyment of the subject. And I really felt this when I was picking my subjects for the 11th grade, because I realized that, over the past couple of years, my enjoyment of a subject was just linked to my exam performance in that subject. Now, easy or tough I might have found the exams. And on the contrary, me not liking a subject would probably equate to the fact that I did not find preparing for the exam for that specific subject easy enough. And I think this scenario is particularly challenging for teenagers who are trying to navigate through a crucial developmental stage. And these academic experiences for us, they can significantly shape our future aspirations. And I think exam stress holds a huge weightage on that. So what exercises or practices would you recommend to teens to focus more on the actual preparation and less on the pressure to perform, or less on unfavorable experiences that might trigger anxiety during that learning process?
That's a very good and a very important question, because like I said, this is the kind of anxiety that we develop. So exam-related anxiety, Adhivir, if I were to say, when I was doing research for my Mitra trial, is basically something that develops at the age of almost 12. That's the earliest that exam-related anxiety in students has been reported. And as in when the student grows older and, all the subjects and the kind of aspirations and his goals start coming right in front of him, that anxiety levels may increase or decrease depending on his or her perception of the stress that he or she will face during the course of the future. So the number one, the most important advice or suggestion that I have for young teenagers is always and always to shift focus from the negativity, remove your focus from negative thoughts, because our minds are tend towards a negative bias. We need to relearn, reshape, and reform a pathway towards positivity. And the best part of doing that is by practicing gratitude, by practicing whatever you've been blessed with. Because apart from all the performance anxiety, there are so many strengths that you have been blessed with. I would say just a simple mindfulness routine with your best song. Keep your go-to song ready with you. I'm sure you have your favorites. I have mine. In fact, मेरे लिए सबसे favorite song was रुक जाना नहीं तो कभी हार के कांटों पे It's like Chalenge Sai Bahar Ke. It's a very nice song, but it was a song that used to be my go-to song. So the best part is have a mindfulness routine every day in the morning before you start studying. Focus on 3 important strengths that you have, whichever strengths those may be. You could be a multitasker. You could be a person who is very kind and compassionate. You could be a person who gives their self-care a priority, whatever it is. But focus on those important qualities that you have. Don't think about the negatives at all when you start your day. Bring about that go-to song whenever you feel a negativity coming towards your way, or you feel as if it's going to become difficult to handle. And the most important of all, consider yourself to be your best friend in your preparation. So always give yourself a pat on the back. Give yourself a big thumbs up when you've achieved your goal. Go and shout it out to the world. Tell your mom, I've completed this. I was going to do this today and I was able to do it, mom. I'm so happy about it. So that's what I feel as teenagers. It's a very simple task. People would say that, why do I need to do all this? I need to study. But give yourself that self-care that you need, a positive self-care, a self-loving care that will automatically generate the kind of positivity that is lacking when it comes to preparation and exam anxiety. And that's one of the things that I think I would advise students to always follow.
It's wonderful you mentioned gratitude, ma'am, because gratitude was actually the theme of the first ever podcast I did. And yeah, I discussed it with a former monk, Mr. Nitya Shanti, and he talked about the science behind gratitude and how just practicing mindful reflection can create a complete shift from worrying and anxiety to positive thinking, right? And self affirmations. And I think that's a huge role. I think gratitude helps you truly remember what you have going for you in your tough times. Gratitude helps you find avenues for support. You're thankful to your parents, to your friends, to people around you who might be helping you. And that immediately makes you realize all your strengths, which is really important in then that rebuilding phase and that working phase when you're trying to accomplish a goal, when you're trying to get to a goal. Knowing your strengths and having that realization, I think gratitude is key for that. And it's really great you mentioned that. And I think it's great that you gave us 2 lines of your favorite song as well, because I think sooner or later I would have asked you to do that. So I think it's great you've told us about your favorite song, and it sounded like a very positive, very happy song.
Yeah, it's a movie Imtihan. If you want to listen to it after this podcast, or you want to play
I
it,
think I will.
play
I think I'll
it
give it a
at the end,
listen.
you would do that.
Yeah, but no, it's just wonderful you talked about gratitude, because I'd say I've faced a significant shift in how I treat my obstacles throughout the day, because now I've made it a habit to sort of note down in my journal things I'm grateful for at the end of every day, and sort of gradually making it a habit helps you take a moment to acknowledge what's going for you, whether it's the support of your family, whether it's just good weather, which is rare to find in Delhi these days,
Yes,
or
reaching home
anything
timely,
else.
beating the
Reaching
traffic.
home timely, yeah, beating the traffic. I mean, today I pretty much had to walk 15-20 minutes from outside my house because there was a huge jam. I think the entire road was flooded.
Oh
But I
gosh,
think, yeah, I think these small habits really make you realize the
more
true
positive in
essence of
life.
life.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, the
that's
true
correct.
positives. And I think that's something very important to recognize. And now that you've talked about staying positive, man, I think there's one more thing that I'd love for you to address. And that is that we all face setbacks, right? In whatever task we're doing. And whether that's teenagers or adults, I think every point of our life, we reach a roadblock and we start to doubt ourselves and think, okay, can I go past this obstacle? Or maybe I can't. And we face that self doubt. So even though you're positive, what's your approach to staying motivated and staying resilient when things don't go as planned?
So, first and foremost, Adivir, I have dedicated my life to one simple purpose of doing whatever you do. Give respect to each and every task that you do. Give it your best shot. That's all that God and this world desires of you. The moment each of us start giving the task the best that it requires us to do for it, automatically things fall into place. And most of the times, whenever you're prepared, it's like there's a famous quote, right? Failure to prepare means you are preparing to fail. So you need to prepare well, but at the same time, you must understand that when you perform your best, and how you were able to do it is because it's of a simple thing in life. See, if God closes one door, suppose there is a setback you face, I always feel that He will open two other new windows. And through those two windows, you will get a breath of fresh air. Through the other window, you'll be able to get a new perspective to life and set your new goal in another direction. There's always light at the end of a tunnel. There is always a place for you to fall back on, and that is you yourself. You need to learn to count on yourself, to become your best friend, and to take on the challenges, because then those challenges will not become a crisis. They will be just considered as a challenge. So I feel that's the best part about it. Don't wallow in self-pity. Don't wallow in remorse. Just take the next step. Every day is going to be a new day. Every step you take in the direction is going to take you towards a new goal. It may not be the same. And definitely setbacks are there. We need to understand that if we can't learn from them, then we probably would not be able to move ahead in life. So one shouldn't worry about the setbacks. One should only worry about giving their best shot and then leaving the rest up to God. So that's what I feel.
Yes, ma'am. I think what you feel resonates with a lot of others, because it's definitely very important to believe in yourself, and it's definitely very important to bounce back and really just dust yourself off and get back up. I mean, the only thing you can do after a failure is take the learning from it
Yes.
and move on. And very rightly said that we shouldn't dwell on it for too long. You should, in fact, use that as a learning and as an understanding. And though that entire idea and notion of using failure as a platform to success might take a while to come, once you make it a habit, once you start taking things in your stride, and once you really start understanding that things may not always go your way.
No, not
But
at all. I'll
things.
tell you, I have flunked in a few exams. It's not that I've passed all my exams. I flunked in my second year of medical college when I was unable to appear well in preparation of my pharmacology exam. Now, pharmacology is a very difficult subject. One needs to really
Right.
learn a lot about medications and drugs and the pharmacokinetics and the pharmacodynamics. And unfortunately, my hostel room caught fire. And that happened in
Oh,
the middle of the night, and the entire hostel had to be
that's
evacuated.
unfortunate.
Yes, it was. And obviously, I flunked that exam because I wasn't able to write. I had a lot going on in my mind. But, I had a lot of friends to buck me up. They knew that this is not the Farah that is going to be there sitting in the hall. This is someone who is definitely has had a very challenging night. And it was one of my first exams of the subject. So I had yet to get a hold of it. And I realized that, this fire, the real fire, it cannot quell the fire in my heart to succeed in life. I need to just
How
focus on
poetic.
that fire and not the real fire. So there is
Yeah.
something that you need
How
to move
poetic.
ahead in life, and you to just shift focus. That's
Yeah.
where we change the perception of the stress that is standing right in front of us. So what if I
Right.
flunked one exam? I was going to cover it up in the next. I just needed to keep that fire going.
Right. And very, very well said about how, sometimes you should just do your best and leave the rest up to God, and believe that there's a higher power noticing your efforts and rewarding you proportionally for that effort. And I think I have a couple of stories as well. I used to play competitive chess back in the day.
Oh,
And yeah, I know it seems weird me saying back in the day, still being a teenager, but for the longest time, I was a competitive chess player. And at that young, tender age, it can be a very stressful
yeah, I can
subject of
imagine.
learning,
Yes, yes,
because
absolutely.
it takes a huge toll on you. For a little kid of the age of 12 or 13 to be sitting down on a board for 3-4 hours, probably twice or thrice a day, playing opponents double your age, triple your age, different kinds of opponents, I think it takes a huge toll. I reached this point where a tournament was really not going well for me, and I stood at the threshold of almost losing my rating. Right. So a rating is something that you gain if you have good performance in a couple of matches, and it took a
Right.
while for me to get that. And I was about to lose it. And I knew I had been regular with my classes, I'd been regular with my practice. Chess is a very training intensive sport, and I was always very keen to study it. I was very interested to learn. And I didn't believe it at the time, but I was told that my efforts will reap rewards if I just continue to sustain them. Right? Sustaining effort is very important. You shouldn't leave it midway. If things aren't going your way, you should probably double down instead. And that's what I did. And I thought that, I've practiced enough. All the knowledge I need is inside of me. And I probably just need a stroke of luck to go my way. And luckily, the next 4 or 5 games went completely my way. And I was able to dig myself out of that hole. So I completely agree with you. I think God only helps those who help themselves, right? And
Yes,
the
excellent.
first step is helping yourself. And it's wonderful you've talked about that. And now that we're in the topic of self, no better time for me to ask you probably a cliched interview question, but I think we might as well go ahead with it. I'm sure we'll get some insight.
Yes.
If you could give one piece of advice to your teenage self, what would it be?
So I was a very outspoken teenager, but whenever I was faced with a difficult situation, I would end up clamping up and not expressing myself. And I remember that there was a time when I had this altercation with my father. I ended up not speaking to him for a month. And I now regret the fact that I was unable to express myself and explain why that had happened. And I lost a month of my time of interaction with him. So I would suggest all teenagers, and this is the acronym that I follow whenever I'm facing a very challenging, emotionally draining situation. And that simple acronym is the word stop. So S stands for stop and take stock of the situation. Just leave whatever you're doing, whatever is happening in front of you, just stop whatever you are doing at that moment, take a stock of the situation. T, take a deep breath. O, allow your mind to step out of your body and look at the entire situation from a third person perspective. When you take yourself out of the equation of very emotionally challenging problem, you become a third person. That's a mindful exercise that one can do when one learns to focus in the moment and when one learns to meditate in life. That's the whole funda of being mindful. You remove yourself, you detach yourself from the point, use the acronym STOP, and then think from it from a perspective of a third person. How would you probably like to do it? You would probably like to diffuse the argument, right? You would probably not wait to react or wait to respond in an even more angrier way. You would probably, as a third person, try to diffuse the situation among the two involved parties. So be that third person, especially to all the teenagers. Learn to be that third person for yourself. Learn to have that perspective that you don't need to get into an altercation at all times whenever there is an argument. And there are definite ways to overcome a challenging situation. So that's one of my ways of doing it. And that's again, where receptive music therapy, which is listening to healthy ragas and listening to mood uplifting ragas. Once you keep listening to them, Adhivir, you can start hearing the sounds of that beautiful rag in your head whenever a trigger moment or an anxiety trigger sets in. You automatically know what's going to be your fallback beacon, what's going to be that torch in the tunnel, what's going to be that fire in your heart. All that is automatically going to be there in your mind the moment you practice receptive mindfulness. Music therapy related to well-being is all related to that. And that is why I decided to use it in my practice as an anesthesiologist. It's important for us to understand what our goals in life are. And if the goal is to become a person that is true to yourself, you automatically realize that the truth comes with calmness, with peace, and with perceiving the stress not like a foe rather than as a friend. It is going to teach you how to become better in life.
Very profoundly put, ma'am. It's really important to take stock of the situation, as you mentioned, and I think teenagers more often than not fixate on certain points, and sometimes we lose sight of what we really were arguing for in the first place. And
Absolutely.
In most cases, I think I reflect after a couple of arguments with my parents, maybe with my friends, that I was pretty much arguing over a baseless thing.
Yeah.
Right. And if I was in a sane state of mind at the time, I would have probably agreed. But it's important to take a step back then and really reflect on what your actual motive is, because I doubt that the motive would ever be to argue. It'd just be to put your point across clearly. And as long as you're doing that very honestly, and as long as you're able to express yourself, I don't think there should be any scope for problems. And I think that's what you were trying to tell us through your story. So I think that's a very important learning for everyone to take away from this podcast. And I think that's a wonderful note to bring the long answer type question answer round of this podcast to an end. And now we'll head into some rapid fire questions. So you just say the first thing that comes to mind. And these are going to be fairly simple questions, just off the top of your head, whatever you get. I might throw you a couple of curveballs as well, if anything comes to mind for me.
Okay.
So I might ask you that.
All right.
All right. So the first question is, if you weren't a doctor, what would you be doing? And I think it's I'd say it's an obvious guess
Mm-hmm.
from my side. What would that be for you?
I would be a theater actor.
Oh, all right.
I love to interact with the public. I would want to be on the theater, on the stage, interacting with the public, performing in front of them, and probably helping them take back some very important life messages. So I'm all into life
Wonderful.
skills, and I would love to be there in front of an audience and performing.
Oh, wonderful, man.
Right.
So quickly on to the next question. Is there a ritual or a superstition that you use and maybe still follow before a big exam or a big test?
Yeah, I have a favorite t-shirt that I
Oh,
wear.
favorite t-shirt.
Yes.
Favorite.
It sort of cocoons me in positivity. It developed when I was probably giving my second year MBBS exams, the final exams, and I wore it for one of the subjects, and I ended up really doing well. I mean, while I was performing, I knew that I was going to doing really well, and I used to go back home. I used to wash that suit every day, and I used to wear it to the next exam. So that's yes. Have a favorite piece of outfit.
It reminds me of a childhood movie. I'm not sure if you watched it, but it's a movie called Chen Kuli Ki Main Kuli.
Yeah,
where there's this kid. He's a cricketer. I don't know. It just randomly came to mind, so I'm just sharing. And he used to have this lucky bat which he believed was blessed, and if
Yeah.
he used that bat he could never get out, and he could hit God knows how many fours and sixes. But I think then the movie is also very interesting, as in it gives us a great learning, because I think towards the end this bat breaks, and he's the character, he goes through this entire dilemma about whether he's good enough or not, but then he backs his skills, and then he remembers that he was the one wielding the bat, not the other way around. And
Yeah.
then even with an ordinary bat he's able to replicate his heroics. So I think, yeah, it's great you brought that up. It reminded me of this movie I used to watch a lot as a child. All
Okay.
right. So has there been any funny reaction to music therapy from a student of yours?
So I would like to actually share what happened in the past while I was doing my own training, and I
All
was
right.
basically giving anesthesia to this middle-aged gentleman who had a lot of financial issues at home, and his kids had sort of, moved out from his house, and he was all by himself getting operated for a femur fracture. And during the course of the surgery, the residents who were working, because all of us were residents, and it was a night time, and it was an emergency surgery, and it was taking time, and his anesthesia effects sort of started wearing off. And I ended up giving him some supplements which were intravenous. And this young gentleman started singing on the OT table. And it was such a nice song. It was such a nice song that all of us started looking at each other and smiling, because I was getting quite fed up with the surgeons not completing the surgery. The surgeons were getting fed up and frustrated. And one of the youngest residents, who was a friend of mine also, looks at me and he says, "Ma'am, I'm going to have what he's having." So that's what he needed. So that's
Um,
what I understood, that that's the kind of power that music does. It
yeah,
automatically diffuses
100%.
the stress that is there
100%.
in the room, automatically
Yeah.
generates positive energy. And luckily, we were able to complete the surgery in the next 15 minutes, and the song ended.
That's great. That's great. Maybe I can use some clips from this podcast to help me convince my parents and teachers to let me study while listening to music. I
Yeah,
think,
actually, in fact,
yeah,
I would suggest that, because when you listen to rhythmic music, you really do well in maths, and when you listen to
yeah,
soulful
yeah.
music, you do really well in subjects like English and history, and subjects which will add a lot of in-depth analysis to them.
Yeah, I've read that music has a good effect on memory as well. And
Hmm.
actually, while listening to music, if you study certain things, then I think their retention factor is higher.
Yes.
So I
It does
think it's,
improve. A lot of studies, while I was researching for my
yeah,
own method trial, it improves your ability to retain. It
yeah,
augments your memory. It definitely enhances your academic performance. While you listen to
100%.
specific pieces of music, yes.
So I think this can be my next argument. Thank you for that.
As long as you're reaching your little goal that you have kept for
As
yourself
long,
while you're
yes.
listening to that music, I don't think anybody should have a problem.
100%. All right, ma'am. So I think you've answered that you also had some tough experiences with exams, but I want to know, how did you bounce back from them? Immediately, what was your feeling after giving that exam that might have come as a shocker? And then what were your immediate steps towards building yourself back up?
So yes, like I said, the first exam that I flunked in life probably was the pharmacology exam, which was a big exam for me. Like I said, I never give myself. I don't wallow in self pity. I feel what has happened for a reason, yes, but there are multiple other reasons that will help me and enable me to perform better in the next exam. So I will never continue to think about it. The most important part is to not procrastinate and not continue to think about the negative, not continue to be focused on, oh my God, how am I going to even cover it up? Or how am I going to even move ahead with this kind of a failure riding on my back? But the best part about it is that you have a future in front of you, which you can change. And you cannot change that unless and until you have the confidence in yourself to change it. So best part is to retain that confidence, is just to move ahead. Like I said, detach yourself from the situation, take stock of the situation. It's an emotionally challenging event, right? Put yourself as a third person perspective. What would you say to your best friend if he had flunked an exam? Would you say, oh, you should just go away, take a break, get yourself somebody, get a shrink, go get something? No, no. You're going to buck him up. You're going to give him suggestions. You're going to give him some kind of positive energy and positive vibe. That's exactly what you need to be for yourself. So I am my own best friend, and I have multiple other best friends, but I definitely want to have that friendship with myself and always continue to buck myself.
Yes, 100%. I think you should be your own lifelong friend
Yes.
first. Yeah.
Yes.
You should
First.
you should be an enemy for yourself. That's a good takeaway as well. All right. So there's this question as well, which I thought might have been a bit funny, but now hearing about your affinity to the arts and to performance, have you ever danced in your lab coat?
Oh, yes. We have.
Yes.
After we've given a very tough exam to an even tougher examiner, we have come out of the hall and we've danced. We've danced a lot with colleagues. I've not danced with my patients yet, but I
Yet.
intend to. But I intend
Maybe
to.
one day. Maybe
But
one day.
yes, we have danced.
Not when your patient was singing.
I know I do. I wasn't dancing because I was also trying to make sure that he continues to not do anything else beyond the singing. So
Oh,
trying to
all
make
right.
sure
All
that
right.
he remains on
Yeah.
the OT table intact and vitally stable.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wonderful.
that's after an exam you have the thrill of giving a good viva or a good exam, and even for that
Yeah.
matter, just thrill of having finished off with an exam. So that's
Yeah.
when
Being done with a set of exams is a huge relief. And I think,
yep,
one deserves all the dancing after getting through a series of tough exams.
that's right.
100%. 100%. Have you ever caught yourself singing along to your own sessions?
Yeah, I whistle a
Yes.
lot. I
Oh,
whistle a lot in
all
the
right.
operation theater, and a lot of most of my postgraduates have sort of complimented me. And I think we heard Farah ma'am whistling today, so she's had a good day. The other thing is that whenever I'm taking music therapy workshops, so I was taking one at Gargi recently, and there was so much of positive energy that we had generated amongst the people who were attending it that I ended up music therapy sort of have given me that confidence also. I ended up singing in that 300 plus audience. And
Oh,
it
how
was one of
wonderful.
my other favorite
Okay.
songs, which is again another Kishore Kumar, which is Chhu kar mere man ko kiya tune kya ishara.
And I think the last question to close I'll ask you is, you've talked about the advice that you would give your teenage self. What was the best advice you received during your teenage years and by who?
So from my teachers, I got the best advice. Continue to believe in yourself. From my own self and my own self experiences, learn to be your best friend, and I still am. And from my mother, I received a very strong piece of advice. Give respect to each and every task, no matter how small or how big that you end up doing. And don't forget to nurture your interests and your hobbies. And she was always she was herself into drama in her Patna Women's College. She was one of the best essay writers of her college. Her essay on, I think one of her MA, MPhil exams was on the best character that she wanted to write about. And she wrote on Rhett Butler. He's the hero of Gone with the Wind. And it's one of, I think probably I get the creativity from her. And I have sort of retained that in my medical profession because of her. So those are my learnings and from my teenage self that would like to share with you all.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing this with us. And thank you very much for your time throughout this podcast. Thank you for taking us on this incredible journey into the world of music therapy. I'm sure for those of us who find this to be an interesting topic, out of which I think I'm going to be the one talking to all my friends about this in school, in my
Absolutely. I'm so
psychology
glad.
classes as well.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
it's a wonderful avenue that you've opened up and that you've explored, and I'm sure that research going in the later years will only build on this, and this will only become a more exciting and vastly developing field. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time. Thank
Most
you.
welcome, Adivir. I'm so glad that we could do this. And I'm always up for creating awareness about this niche branch because it is an established health profession. People in the field of psychology like you and other allied health professionals and other medical, specialities can take up this course and add to their, make it an integrated medical specialty to their own
Yes.
practice and ensure that the patient well-being and the kind of response that they get out of an outcome that is, decided automatically improves significantly. So it's
Yes.
never, all about just the music. It's always complementing it to your practice. And that is where
100%.
I think I have succeeded, and I like to generate that interest in a patient as well as in my colleagues. And luckily, we've been able to generate it, and we are doing that many theses now in the department, all on music therapy and anesthesia practice together.
That's wonderful, ma'am. That's wonderful. And as you rightly said, I think that this research can be integrated in so many ways and diverse applications, and it can benefit so many people. So thank you for enlightening us about this topic. We will plug in the link to your research article, ma'am. But if you just like to point out where anyone who has any questions about this can reach out to you or reach out to some of your work, then please let us know and we'll plug that in.
Yep, absolutely. You can share my email ID with them. I would love to answer any kind of queries and questions that you have. I'm available at farah.husain.durani@gmail.com. So please go ahead and write to me.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. I think you see the email ID somewhere here, somewhere. Hopefully, where I'm
Sure.
pointing my fingers.
Okay, no
And
worries.
thank you very much for your time, ma'am. It's been
Yes,
wonderful. It's been
absolutely.
wonderful
Musically
engaging
yours.
with you. Thank you. Thank you. From soothing ragas to stress-busting beats, it's clear that music can be a powerful ally in managing exam anxiety and boosting our well-being. Thanks for tuning in, Tenacity fam. Remember, the next time you're feeling overwhelmed, a little music might just be the ticket to calming your nerves. Don't forget to hit subscribe and join us next time for more fun and helpful tips. Until then, stay safe. Bye-bye.